So before we actually, so this conversation is going to be happening in both languages, mainly in English, but there will be answers also in French. So if you do need a translation headset, please do grab one at the entrance of the venue. So before we dive into this conversation, what do we mean when we talk about zero trust? I mean, it sounds like a very generic term, but it's actually very much misleading. Is it just a buzzword? What's your take on this, Manfred?
Well, it's a little bit of a buzzword, but I think the buzz comes from the fact that zero trust means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And you've got technology providers who say that, well, zero trust, we have got the solution for it, and it's a technology solution. And the answer to that is it's really not so much about technology, it is about a philosophy. It's a certain way of rearranging your DNA as an organization to get into a zero trust model.
So it's not technology, it's a thought process, it's a philosophy.
Exactly. Technology is part of it, but much more than that, it is a thought process, it's a concept.
Alors, Dr Michel Dubois, je disais tout à l'heure, donc je vous représente, hein, vous êtes adjoint au CISO du groupe La Poste. Merci d'être avec nous. Vous dites, c'est un buzzword qui a été embarqué par les commerciaux.
Alors oui, effectivement, je rejoins ce qui a été dit à l'instant. Le zéro trust, c'est avant tout une philosophie. Malheureusement, c'est devenu un buzzword. Le monde des commerciaux s'en est emparé. Mais en fait, le zéro trust, c'est une évolution du principe de défense en profondeur que l'on met en place dans toute cybersécurité en entreprise. On avait, jusqu'ici, on avait la défense périmétrique. Et avec les travaux du Forum Jericho en 2004, on est passé au principe de on dépérimètre. Et c'est devenu le Zero Trust après, où en fait on va élargir le concept à l'évolution de nos systèmes d'information et de nos réseaux.
Florence, je me tourne vers vous et vous dites quelque chose qui a été dit dans la première table ronde aussi. Je crois que c'était Benoît Fuseau qui a évoqué ça. C'est une question de contexte. On fait de la sécurité en rapport avec le contexte.
Je vais me permettre de passer en anglais parce que même si je suis française,
comme
j'ai travaillé en anglais, sinon c'est un peu Jean-Claude Van Damme. So indeed, I agree with what's been said. It's been overused by many commercial companies, and so it's lost much of its meaning. But if I had to define it, I would go back to what's been said earlier. It's about contextual trust. So it's about granting access based on a combination of identity and behavioral factors. Think of who is trying to connect to what, from where, at what time. And so the other thing that I'd like to say is there's a lot of misunderstanding of that term. It's a bit unfortunate as a term because it's all about, oh yeah, nothing is trusted. I don't think that's the case. It's just no trust by default. So it's really making implicit trust explicit.
So it's quite misleading in the way that it was worded.
It's a bit of a misnomer, I would say. Yeah.
Uko?
Yeah, it's zero trust in that sense. For me, it's a mindset. So the way of thinking, how we approach that. Trust is not given, it's earned. So you have to earn your trust in a system. And I would say that's the best way to approach that. So there is no system or there is no magic wand, the technology that enforces that. You can use your technology you have at hand, but it's more about the mindset, how we approach that.
Now, you have all said that it's a voyage, right? It's not something that you can just roll out like that. It's something, it's a journey, and you're probably not exactly at the same degree of maturity in your different organizations, but maybe tell us a little bit more about what you're doing. For instance, NATO is doing Zero Trust as well.
Absolutely, and if we could just snap our fingers and say, now we're done with Zero Trust, that would be an ideal state. It's a journey. And we're all on different stages in that journey. And so I think also the number of legacy systems that you have in your overall system landscape makes a big difference. So if you're a younger organization that is just implementing everything and moving very aggressively to the cloud, you're in one situation. If you're an almost 76-year-old organization for deterrence and defense with legacy systems that have been around for quite some time, we have a different starting base. So we're all on different parts of this journey.
Now, Michel, what you say, I'm going to say it in English so that people understand the question. You can answer, of course, in French. But what you're saying is very interesting as well, because you're quite positive, saying that, on this journey of zero trust, many are actually further along the way than they think, because they're already doing things in a zero trust manner, perhaps without even knowing, when they do microsegmentation, access control, for instance.
Effectivement, en fait, beaucoup d'entreprises font déjà du zero trust. Qu'est-ce que je veux dire, à partir du moment où on met en place du MFA, où on met en place de la gestion des accès conditionnels, ce que vous disiez à l'instant, où en fait, en fonction de où je me connecte, vers quoi je me connecte, eh bien, on fait déjà du zero trust. Quand on va commencer à réfléchir à micro-segmenter les réseaux, ce que l'on fait depuis très longtemps, eh bien, on fait aussi du zero trust. Donc en fait, on est vraiment dans cette philosophie où on va partir du moindre privilège et on va essayer de faire en sorte de contrôler qui accède à quoi, à quel instant. Et à ce moment-là, à partir du moment où on met ça en place, eh bien, on fait du zero trust. Et beaucoup d'entreprises font un peu comme le bourgeois gentilhomme, Monsieur Jourdain, le bourgeois gentilhomme, qui découvre qu'il fait de la prose. Et bien, en fait, beaucoup en font déjà du zero trust.
So Zalando is digitally native. It's a young company. You're online. So we're guessing that in the degree of maturity, you're probably already zero trust by default. Is it?
So you're right, and Manfred, you put your finger on it as well. So Zalando is a relatively young company founded in 2008. We're really a tech company that happens to specialize in fashion. And so we have over 3,000 engineers. We're cloud first. We've always followed an identity-based approach. Now, are we perfect? No, we're not, because it's a journey. And as it's been mentioned as well by everyone, it's a mindset, it's a set of principles. But we're also a company, so we have to operate in a risk-based fashion. And so, yes, we try to apply zero trust principles when we can, but there's no perfection there. There are maybe a couple of examples that can show how we embed that I can mention. The first is, as mentioned, zero trust is a mix of identity and contextual approach and factors. And so we've implemented passwordless authentication because it's not only a way to be phishing resistant, but it really helps in making sure that we can specify special controls for sensitive applications, as you were saying earlier. The second one is really on the authorization as a service that we have implemented within Zalando. So we give our engineering teams the ability to make decisions in their code based on context. So it's context-aware authorization, while we, the central team, the central security team, govern that. So it's the best of both worlds, granular decision-making, but at the same time, strong oversight. And so this is a little bit, those represent how we really embed those zero trust principles in our roadmap.
Now, you all have a different outlook on zero trust. Mr. Valtenberg, you're, as I said, at Esta Energia. It's an energy company based in Estonia. It faces, of course, very specific challenges as an energy company, as a critical infrastructure. What are the advantages, perhaps, of zero trust in everything having to do with the industry, and specifically against state-sponsored attacks, because this is what we're fearing today?
Yeah, there are many, I would say, advantages in that sense. If you look at our infrastructure as a whole, so in energy companies and other utilities companies, the issue is the same, as Manfred also brought out, that it's a legacy. In our case, we have to design a system that survives 25 plus 15 years, so up to 50, 40, 45, depends on the system. So the underlying IT infrastructure has to support that. And if we would be able to incorporate the architectural kind of point of view of zero trust into the OT and the ICS systems, would mean that in our greatest, I would say, adversaries that we have today, naming APT 2928 and so on. So threat actors from governmental point, threat actors are really mighty. In that sense that in industry systems, we still rely on the old approach, molten castle defense. There's a reason for that. The systems are very complex. And we emphasize more the availability, the integrity, and the safety. Confidentiality is important, but
not as much.
There's a complexity in the systems, and there's a reason for that. But if we would enforce, I don't know, certificate-based, for example, zero-trust approach, it would mean that from attack perspective, it would be much easier to contain and to defend us.
Right.
So we can, if something happens, we can contain, and we can, or the adversary cannot progress in those systems. Today, it's purely molten castle. Once you're in, you're in. And then we have the excruciating work to find out, localize, shut down, maybe also shut down business for a while. And in energy companies, bringing up something like energy production, it's not like switching off and on. It doesn't work like that. Right. Sometimes, dependent on the system, it takes weeks to bring it up again. So we lose millions if we switch something off. So we have to be really careful, and zero trust would help a lot in that scenario.
Now, what's interesting is that what you're saying is the goal is not always to be 100% zero trust. It really depends on your priority. And Manfred, you were saying that one of the critical issues is that for these infrastructures, you can't mandate zero trust throughout the board. Is that one of the goals that you would have, is to try to enforce that for critical infrastructures, if you could? Well,
enforcing is hard, right? I mean, there are standards, there are rules that, especially in the EU, there's a very big rule set that is there, but to enforce it is difficult. I think there needs to be an education, and there needs to be continued dialogue on making sure that the value is realized by companies that provide critical infrastructure to go to zero trust. So I'm not one who wants to push too much onto the regulation side and onto the rule side. They are important to a certain extent, but there are some inherent benefits that for-profit companies need to realize, and it is the education for those inherent benefits, I think, that where the emphasis should be.
So I want to go back on this idea that it's a mindset, right, and that the goal is not always to try to reach that 100% zero trust everywhere. What's your take on this, Florence, and then Michel?
I think that 100% just doesn't make a ton of sense. Because again, it's a journey, it's a mindset, it's an architecture that you work towards. And so, just like anything else in security, there is no 100% really. So it's all about the risk-based approach once again, having visibility, because you can't protect what you don't know about and what you can't see, and then prioritize based on cost considerations and also just ability to implement.
And that's another question. How do you balance, on one hand, cost and security and wanting to secure, and at the same time, not adding too much complexity as well?
So zero trust is not just adding a layer. For me, it's really rethinking the architecture
altogether.
And so if anything, it should simplify your processes, not complicate them. What you mentioned earlier made me think about it, but we're implementing machine-to-machine authentication in a decentralized fashion, which is a lot of words to mean that we're trying to make sure that each micro-segment in our cloud infrastructure is independent. So, like in a submarine, if one gets breached, all of the others stay watertight. And that's what we're doing right now, and it's a simplification, because in the case of an attack, we'll be able to respond faster. So again, for me, just zero trust should be done in a simplified way. It's not a layer of complexity that we add on top.
Michel Dubois, I can see you're nodding.
Oui, alors, le zero trust ne doit pas être s'appliquer partout, en fait. Et je reprends ce qui a été dit un peu, c'est tout est basé sur l'analyse du risque. Si on a une entreprise qui a un réseau qui est fermé, qui est connecté à rien du tout, enfin alors ça existe peu aujourd'hui, mais ou qui n'a pas fait encore de move to cloud, ou qui a une taille qui est trop petite pour traiter ce type de sujet, elle n'a pas besoin de faire du zero trust. Encore, je vous disais tout à l'heure, en fait, c'est le principe de défense en profondeur. On a de la défense périmétrique, on fait son analyse de risque, et en fonction du risque, on va mettre en place du zero trust. Et encore, dans le zero trust, on ne va pas forcément mettre en place toutes les technologies qui sont derrière. Donc il faut qu'on peut-être prioriser l'architecture réseau et après peut-être éventuellement mettre en place un renforcement d'identité, un renforcement du flux, du chiffrement des flux. Enfin voilà, il y a plein de choses à mettre en place et c'est l'analyse du risque qui va faire en sorte qu'on ait les bonnes mesures de sécurité en face du risque que l'on a, et c'est là où en fait on va pouvoir faire en sorte, je rejoins complètement, c'est pas une surcouche, il faut simplifier les choses, et dans beaucoup de cas, moi je le vois dans l'entreprise où je travaille, on arrive à simplifier certains processus au travers des mécanismes de Zero Trust.
So, Uko, how do you deploy, because Michel Dubois was just saying earlier that you need to be based on risk analysis to then deploy your zero trust mindset. How do you go about it when you want to rethink that architecture in a zero trust manner?
Yeah, in that sense, in my case, for example, I first time as a CISO have a small architecture team. So the architecture team helps me to reason, and also we have input from our risk and compliance team where we take the risk that we have addressed, and with the architects we, develop a solution around that. And the solution that we develop, we always, from the architectural point of view, keep it simple, stupid, is the main approach for all the systems, that we try not to introduce additional complexity, but we look at it more from the user perspective. So we want to make user processes much easier, much intuitive in that sense. And then we have had some wins in regular systems, not specifically in OT, but IT. Windows Hello, login, much easier. You don't have to use VPN for all the systems, stuff like that. And you take out some additional steps in the process that makes the life much comfortable, and you can access everywhere and so on and so forth. So Zero Trust has lots of value if you think about that, how the value is gained through enforcing those technologies or that mindset with those technologies. So that's how we do it. And my architecture team, I would say, it's the first time I do this way, but it works.
Manfred.
So picking up on that point a bit, I think Zero Trust should be a simplification of things. It should not make things harder, especially for users, as you said, right? The whole single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, all of that is meant to make the user's life easier. Mm-hmm. And where the complexity comes in and the difficulty is to get to Zero Trust. So while Zero Trust itself is an easier or a simplification, to get there is hard, because there are two things that you need to do. You need to understand your people, your users, and you need to understand the objects that are being accessed. And in order to get to that understanding, you have a lot of work to do. On the one side, you have identity and access management. Mm-hmm. If you have been around for a while, chances are you've got more than one identity and access management system. So there needs to be a very strong identity and access management focus. And then on the other side, you need to really understand your data. You need to know the classification level of the data. And at NATO, we obsess over unclassified, restricted data, confidential, secret data, top secret data. So that, for us, makes a huge difference. You need to have that understanding in order to match users with the data that needs to be accessed. And that's where the complexity comes in.
En fait, on pourrait faire croire que ça semble plus simple, mais la complexité, elle est déportée sur les gens qui font la cyber, les gens qui font l'informatique. Finalement, pour l'utilisateur...
Et se traduit en facilité pour l'utilisateur.
Exactement. Ça permet d'apporter de la simplification pour l'utilisateur. On ne va pas forcément lui demander son mot de passe systématiquement, parce que le système l'aura authentifié avant, on aura propagé son identité dans le système, ce qui fait qu'on va avoir... une appropriation de la cyber et des règles de cybersécurité plus faciles pour l'utilisateur, et la complexité, on la déporte dans les systèmes. Alors effectivement, on met de la classification, on met des authentifications fortes, on est en train de supprimer le mot de passe, c'est un bonheur pour les utilisateurs, on remplace par des quais avec du protocole FIDO2 et des choses comme ça. Et donc finalement, on a transféré la complexité dans le système, et l'utilisateur, pour lui, c'est plus simple, et du coup, c'est plus sécurisé, et c'est assez magique comme concept, en fait.
De temps en temps, on se retrouve avec des captchas indéchiffrables. Hein. Je ne sais pas si c'est moi, mais... So Zero Trust is supposed to add more facility for a little be easier for the user, but it's interesting because you just said that internally, it's actually harder, makes things harder. So what are the reasons that some companies, let them be private or public, are not rolling out a zero trust mindset? Is it because it does involve technology and costs? Is it because it's complicated to do it? Is it because of internal resistance? What are the type of obstacles that you've encountered in your different organizations in trying to, diffuse this mindset? Mr. Valtenberg.
There are several. For example, in Estonian Energy, I'm quite new at, to be honest. It's my second year in, and I started from scratch. So, and I see, I'll say, that there is a lack of skill, knowledge. Also in bigger companies and old companies like ours, 85 years, I would say that I've heard several times like we have done that like that for the last 25 years, and why have to we change? And then sometimes when you change technology or approach of the technology, you have to change processes. And in an old big company, changing processes is something excruciating sometimes. It's not as easy. So people are accustomed to certain ways of doing things, certain ways of using solutions, services, and now you're coming in and saying we have to do it differently. And in many cases, it's not just about changing processes. If you employ new technologies, then you have to change processes also. Otherwise, you end up changing the new solution according to the old process. Doesn't make any sense. If you have something new and some new capabilities and some new technologies, you have to accustom the process around that. And that's, I would say, one of the biggest issues I've seen in my company.
En fait, sur la complexité de l'adoption, comme je disais tout à l'heure, peu de gens se rendent compte qu'ils ont déjà fait du Zero Trust. Quand on regarde le document du NIST sur ce qu'est le Zero Trust, il y a 7 principes, 7 règles qui mettent en place. En fait, nous, on a fait l'inverse. C'est-à-dire que ça fait tellement longtemps que le message est brouillé, que tout le monde entend parler de Zero Trust. On a fait la liste de ce qu'il y a dans le NIST, puis on se dit, mais en fait, on a déjà parcouru plus de 50% du voyage.
Coché.
Exactement, on a déjà coché cette case-là, on fait de la surveillance, on a un SIEM, on chiffre nos flux, les logs sont collectés. Donc en fait, on a déjà mis un certain nombre de choses en place, on fait de la gestion des accès conditionnels. Du coup, quand on va voir le COMEX et qu'on leur dit, ben voilà, il nous reste plus que ça à faire, on a fait les 80%, il nous reste 20% à faire sur le Zero Trust pour y arriver. Et quand on leur dit, ben voilà, pour nous, on est en train de finaliser la micro-segmentation. Alors, c'est des grosses infrastructures réseau, et c'est là peut-être la complexité du changement. On n'aime pas changer dans nos infrastructures, c'est toujours compliqué de changer. Mais quand on a dit, ben voilà, on a déjà fait un certain nombre de choses, petit pas par petit pas. Le Zero Trust, Forrester, c'est 2010, donc on a quand même une maturité là-dessus. Et ben voilà, petit à petit, on a évolué. Et c'est plus facile de le dire aujourd'hui. Enfin, moi, je trouve que voilà, on n'est pas loin de la fin. En fait, on n'est pas loin d'arriver au domaine idéal.
Florence, vous vouliez réagir aussi?
I agree with what you've been saying. I still think that there's an aspect of the longer the journey, the bigger the struggle. So if you look at more traditional companies, the dot on the horizon is really, really, really far. Yeah. And it means a lot of investment, it means time. And so for me, it means also a real change of mindset. And that's one of the things that we as CISOs need to help with. It's our job to translate. It's our job to put together a roadmap to explain that it's not doing everything overnight, step by step, risk-based, and also to show, as you said, that some things are already done. So there's a real role of the CISO to play there so that it doesn't feel so daunting.
Zero Trust is it's like going to the gym. We all know we have to do it, we need to do it. We are very motivated of doing it, but life gets in the way, right? And so I think, and also, Florence, what you said, the point that is in the future, it's a difference if you've got a few pounds to lose or if you've got more to lose. And so the whole routine of going to the gym is kind of this mindset. So I think for a lot of companies, a change to Zero Trust is in conflict a bit with business, with creating new applications, with putting things out there. There is only a finite number of people and of time that you have. and you need to set priorities as to how do you spend it. And it's the same for public organizations as well, right? You have competing priorities, and we all know it's really important, and so we need to make time for it and fit it in, and then go to the gym at least 3 days a week because it protects your health, and it's a good thing to do.
That's a very good analogy. Security within NATO, of course, relies on collaboration between several entities, several countries. There's a need for interoperability, harmonization, labeling. How do you go about the fact that all of the nations in Europe don't have the same degree of maturity and the same pace?
So that's just a natural thing. I think we've all established earlier that we are in different parts of the journey, and so that is the same with our 32 member nations that we have at NATO, but also within...
It's at another scale, though.
It's at a different scale, but also within the NATO enterprise, we have different organizations with lots and lots of systems, and so we are marching at a different pace. We all make it a priority, and we're moving fast, but it is a different... it's a different pace and different positions that we are in that journey. And so the answer to that is to make it flexible. You cannot transition one part and that part then becomes inoperable, where it is no longer talking to the other parts of the organization. So it's a bit of a mix between a puzzle game and a domino game, that you do it right and you do it in harmony.
Now, we spoke about this morning in the introductory panel, Zero Trust is about authentication, so that leads me to the question of digital identity. Mr. Valtenberg, you're from Estonia. We all know that Estonia is the first e-nation. I think it's more than 90% of government services that are already digitized. More? 90%?
It's getting near to 99, I guess.
So you're literally, as a nation, digitally native. How did you embark the Estonians, though, on this journey? How did the country do that in the forefathers?
Yeah, it's a trick question, actually. No, it's. I've been telling that a lot to my colleagues from outside of Estonia, and they also wonder how that we don't go mad and don't, get panicked that the government will also spy on us. But you have to understand where we come from. So in 92, regaining our freedom again, coming from Soviet Union, having the legacy of that, which wasn't much actually, to be honest, and then losing all the governmental, machinery behind that, we have to decide where and how next. And in Estonia, we established that we are a small country. There is 1.3 million of people in Estonia. Landmass is the size of Netherlands and Denmark. Lots of free space, but not enough in that sense that support a heavy government. So bureaucracy-wise, we established that we need to do something new. And we did the tiger leap, which we call in Estonia, and then we started to digitalize everything. And it wasn't really a hard decision. It just showed us that this is the right way. And back in 2002, when we established the ID card system, we established that every newborn Estonian will get the digital ID. And the underlying system was like the way we explained to our public people in Estonia that you have the control of that system. You have the capability to audit the system. You can see who accessed your data. You can revoke the access to that data every time, and so on and so forth. And we started to build our infrastructure, digital infrastructure around that. So, giving people the benefits, having that digital ID enables people to sign contracts, establish companies in a minute, do taxes under 2 minutes almost. Lots of things. In Estonia, I would say we are almost rid of the paper bureaucracy.
Right.
It's full digital.
Now, of course, all companies, it can really facilitate the job of companies if there's digital identity within a country. What would be your arguments to try to convince people that digital identity is the way to go? Because maybe it wasn't the case in Estonia, but in other countries, I'm thinking in France, for instance, digital identity is not seen as something positive. It has a very much a big brother vibe to it for French people, at least. What would be your argument in favor of digital identity?
So I've been living in the Netherlands for 20 years, and we also make big use of digital identity, a bit behind, but we're catching up. For me, it's like having a passport, but it's the digital version of a passport. And I view this as a much safer way than uploading my passport copy, for example, to 20 different sites. I prefer sending a token, like showing your passport, rather than having to do that. So for me, that's the argument. It is a safer way, and just like a passport is completely independent from any political party or any government at one time, I think this is how digital identity should be seen. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that in the short term we can just say, okay, let's all use digital identity. It will be, again, a journey. But maybe a mix, right? Give the option to use digital identity or more traditional ways for those who don't feel comfortable. From a business perspective, as long as it's in touch with, in line with regulations, for us at Zalando, that's also something we'd consider. So it depends on the country, of course, but we would give it as an option. We wouldn't force everybody to use it.
Michel Dubois.
En fait, en faveur de l'identité numérique, on en a parlé tout à l'heure, on est dans le zéro trust, mais en fait, c'est l'inverse. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut qu'on maintienne cette confiance. Il faut que chaque citoyen, chaque personne ait confiance dans le traitement qui va être fait sur les données qui lui reviennent, qui sont à elle. Parce qu'en fait, finalement, c'est une notion de propriété. Je suis propriétaire des données qui me concernent. Et à ce moment-là, il faut qu'on maintienne cette confiance. Et le seul moyen, c'est la transparence. Donc, en fait, si on généralise cette identité numérique, ce qui est une bonne chose, en fait, moi, je suis assez favorable à ça, eh bien, il faut que je puisse savoir, en tant que citoyen, en tant que client, en tant que... qui a accès à mes données. Et donc, je veux pouvoir avoir un accès en disant, ben voilà, tel médecin a accédé à mes données, tel policier ou tel gendarme a accédé à mes données, tel magistrat a accédé à mes données, et je sais qui a accédé à mes données, et je peux dire à un instant T, ben écoutez, cette donnée-là, je n'ai pas forcément envie que tout le monde la voie, et je maîtrise cette information. Et si on donne cette capacité de transparence et de maîtrise de son information, eh bien à ce moment-là, on pourra plus facilement obtenir l'adhésion et avoir une identité numérique qui soit performante. Et puis, il y a un deuxième point, c'est la multiplicité des identités numériques. Vous avez parlé du passeport, la carte d'identité en France, elle est numérique. On a plein d'identités numériques, on a l'identité numérique professionnelle, on a l'identité, pour ceux qui ont fait le service militaire, il y a l'identité numérique auprès des ministères de la Défense, en fait. Et on a plein d'identités numériques, et résultat, la donnée, on a une identité numérique au niveau médical, qui est différente. Et tout ça, c'est dispersé à droite et à gauche, et finalement, ça complexifie les choses. On ne sait pas qui accède à quelles données, comment elles sont corrélées entre elles, s'il n'y a pas des erreurs. Et donc, il faut arriver à unifier ces identités et avoir justement cette plateforme unifiée avec la confiance qu'on met derrière.
Now, how do you see things going forward with Zero Trust in the next couple of years? Because now you're sitting down in this specific contest. As we said, it's linked to context. So you're making decisions based on the information that we have today. You're rethinking all of your infrastructures. And for instance, in the energy sector, you're on the long term. Every decision that you make has to be able to be maintained in the long run. But thinking about all the different disruptive technologies that are coming forward, I'm thinking, of course, about quantum and what that would entail, decryption. So how do you see things going forward? I mean, things could, in a way, become obsolete tomorrow, couldn't it?
Yes, in that sense, quantum is coming. Everybody sees. Microsoft did just
with the Willow chip.
leap in that also. So no encryption will be safe at some point. But luckily, we are already working, at least in Estonia, also because we are highly dependent on our public key infrastructure, post-quantum encryption. So for Zero Trust point of view, at the moment, if you look at how the systems are developed, molten castle approach, if there is encryption, some sort of used, then it's like encryption used for VPNing into the system, and after that everything is voila, play around and do whatever you want. But in that sense, if you would enforce Zero Trust, even in that sense, Then the question remains how the encryption is built up, what encryption is used. But still, if every system in the whole has a security layer on it, it's even in quantum era much more difficult to break through. At the moment, the systems are developed. It's like how to say, you have to break one master key, and the rest of the keys fall down. That's how easy it is, in general terms. So yeah.
We just have just 1 minute or 2 minutes left. Briefly, what would be your takeaway of this roundtable? What is the message that you want people in the room to remember after our talk? Manfred?
Well, so Zero Trust is here. It's a philosophy. It's not so much a technology. It's supported by technology, but it is a philosophy. It is not in conflict with some of the things that we just talked about. Like they're complementary. So quantum-resistant encryption is complementary with Zero Trust. Yeah, so I think it's a long journey. Sometimes you have that red dot pretty far in the horizon, but you need to get started in order to get there, because how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Florence?
I'm going to have to quote somebody very famous. Zero Trust is like going to the gym.
It was a good analogy, wasn't it?
It is, and
Life
I think
does get in the way.
it's a great takeaway because in a way that we all need to do it, we all need to apply those principles. Yes, it's hard, and yes, it won't happen overnight that we become better and better, but with a risk-based approach, that's how we can get there.
Michel Dubois.
Zero Trust, c'est une évolution de manière de voir la cybersécurité. Il faut garder à l'esprit que la cybersécurité, c'est un état d'esprit, qu'on cherche à sécuriser l'information, qu'on cherche à sécuriser les identités. Et donc le Zero Trust est une étape pour y arriver. Ça couvre plein de sujets, et donc c'est un domaine passionnant à faire.
And Yuko, what would be your last message?
Yeah, I would keep it simple. That's the way.
That's the way. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this roundtable. I'd just like for us to take a look at this drawing that was made by Nicolas over there. Thank you so much for that. Zero Trust, what does it mean? Lots of different ways, but I think you all agree on the fact that it's a philosophy, it's a mindset, it's a long journey, and we need to embark on it. Thank you so very much to all of you for taking part in this conversation. I think we can give them a warm round of applause. Thank you very much indeed.